What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today we're going to be doing a full account review, going over all the units I have. I'll try to give you the best summary possible on how I use the units and why I build them a certain way, and hopefully after this you kind of have an idea on how I personally use the unit and some ideas on how you want to build your units. But again, thank you so much for the 5,000 subs. It has been an amazing journey and I cannot wait to see the channel grow even more and more. And next time we'll be at 10k and we'll be doing an Aether cosplay there. So make sure you like and subscribe for the channel. I have a ton of stuff lined up for you guys too as well. Since you guys saw a poll, I do have a lot of video ideas ready. So with that in mind, let's get right into the video for the full account review. How far have I come from the last time we did this? So first, starting with Sirmia. So we're going to go over every unit. We're going to go by the elements. So fire, earth, water, and light and dark. And I'll try to do it quicker for the units I don't use as often. And then the units I use more, I'll try to go more in depth on. But first, Sirmia, I actually used to use a lot, which is why I actually have a Molagor for the most part. I do plan to Molagor the S1 for Hall of Trials to actually finish the Dagger Shakar missions. But she's a homegirl. You know, I have a bunch of imprints on her for some weird reasons. Naga gives me a lot of Sirmia. I used to use her a lot for Guild Wars and for RTA as well. I did have a really cool speed build when we were doing the RGB challenge. So I do want to bring her back because I did have a lot of fun with her and I thought she actually had potential as a unit, right? So for sure, it's a really good unit. I'm really happy with her, how she is, and I just want to actually have gear, but my account overall is lacking in speed gear because it's on other units, as you will see as we get later in the video. Hada Yufin is kind of a unit that I do actually have built, but I just never find myself using because most of the time when I use her to counter Basar, because that's the main thing she does, right? It's counter Basar. Every time I use her for that scenario, she kind of feels bad. Why? Because they usually will have something like a Last Word of Crawl or a Seaside or a Fallen Cecilia that will just soak up a lot of the damage. And if they ban her and you don't ban Basar because you're trying to predict, then you get Basard, right? And then it's just like, okay, you kind of messed up. So it's kind of hard to draft her, and she does have a lot of counters. I do have a decent build. I mean, Warnhor, of course, is not maxed out, but it'd be cool to max it out. I do give her some crit for some damage. But again, she just feels kind of weird, right? Right now, it's just every time I draft her, it feels bad, right? So I just haven't played her, but I do have the build just in case I really feel like she'd fit. Ravi used to be my homegirl. I do have a full guide on her because I used to, and it's still relevant to this day. Like most of the stuff I said in that video, I think is still actually pretty accurate. With the exception of that she's not as strong in RTA, but she has become a monster in PvE. I know a lot of early game players have been asking about Ravi. She's decently hard to build, and again, go watch the video for the most part, but the counter set build is just kind of the way to go. It's just so good to have her counter set. I do use her for raid, for autoing raid. We did a whole stream how we did hard raid, and she was the core DPS for my personal team. But for the most part, the one thing I would change is I wish I had more HP. That's pretty much it. And 100% crit. If I could get 100% crit and like at least 1k more HP, I think I'd be perfectly happy with my Ravi. One way we probably can do that is if we max out Sacred Scythe, we get a lot more HP, and then kind of switch out these purple gears for equivalent gear, and maybe lose a little bit of the speed, get a little bit more crit rate, and maybe get a little bit more health that way, right? So we could probably squeeze out a little bit more, especially because this here we're losing some stats to effectiveness. We could definitely get a little bit more, especially if we got like higher level boots. I really do think we could probably get that goal of 16k. So that's something that I may start looking at, but maxing Sacred Scythe is probably not going to happen because there's so much other artifacts right now. But I mean, I use her a lot for raid. I do occasionally still use her for RTA and Guild Wars. Ross, I used to use all the time. I have a really good build on him for some odd reason. The only thing I would want to change is the artifact. Or not Adamant Shield. It's not that it's not good, but I just think Rise of Monarchs is so good on him. It just makes Ross go from like a A tier unit to like an A+, right? Rise of Monarchs, I feel like is the best artifact on him, especially because he's so fast. But I still do use him a lot for PvE, which is why he's on Adamant Shield. I don't really use him for PvP anymore. It just doesn't feel the best. I only pick him when Fallen Cecilia is banned and Crawl is taken, right? So if Crawl is taken and if Fallen Cecilia is banned, then I will probably pick my Ross in that situation, right? Because that's kind of what I need. Or if I'm feeling kind of spicy and want to do a cool combo with something like my Landy and I just want to have a little bit of fun with Landy, then I'll pick my Ross as well. And if I ever get a Meryl, you know I'm going to be using my Ross. But for the most part, I would wish more effectiveness for PvE, but besides that, I mean, everything else is great. I'm really happy with it. Elnaf, more recent additions. Still trying to figure out how she really would fit into my team and trying to find the right gear for her, which is why I'm actually on Banshee right now. But for the most part, she just feels weird, right? It's just like takes too long to ramp up, and RTA meta is pretty fast. And Arena, you're usually cleaving. So I do use her in Arena occasionally, but I usually prefer a Tywin over her, right? So it's one of those things that I'm already using a Tywin. So it's kind of, unless I really want the crit damage buff for my Stene, it's kind of weird how she fits in. She doesn't really fit in any of my teams right now. Lilia, so I used to use all the time, still one of my favorite units. I still think she's amazing. She's my other Adamant Shield, or was my other Adamant Shield holder. She no longer is my Adamant Shield holder, because I clearly she's not geared. You do want to Molagora this S2 up because it makes her really good. She's amazing for PvE. It's just my team's already pretty settled, and I don't include her in any of my PvE teams, so there hasn't been a reason for me to actually build her, especially because for PvP she kind of fell off a little bit. Just not her meta right now. There's a lot of other knights that are higher priority, including things like Crawl, right, or Falconeer Clury, or even to an extent Ross, right? Her S3 is still super amazing, one of the best S3s in the game, and can still definitely win you. She can still definitely work for RTA. It's just a little bit harder. And she can do okay if you speed tune her right, but if you make her a little too slow, then the carrot puts the burns, and it becomes a mess, right? Like, she can theoretically cleanse a carrot, but that means your whole team has to be pretty slow, including her, which is not always ideal in an RTA setting. So not her meta right now, but she's still an amazing unit for PvE. I do plan to build her in the future and make something with a Rose, right? I want to make a Rose team. Kayron used to be my pride and joy. I used to love my Kayron. He's no longer on the OP build that I used to have on him. He's now in the counter build, which I originally thought was the worst build, which it was back in the day, but now it's like the superior build, ironically. I just barely ever use him, because the only times I ever use him is if there's no strips and no heavy water, which both of those almost never happen. There's almost always a Crow, there's almost always an F10, there's almost always a Cerise, there's almost always some form of strip. Operator Sigrid strips, Emil Kawasu strips, who's a little bit newer. Stenes are really tanky now, so you can't really kill them with S1s unless you proc Dust Devil. It's just, FCC just completely blocks you out. It's just not his meta, right? Kisei also just strips him and resets his cooldown, so he becomes a sitting duck, right? So there's a lot of threats to Kayron right now. It is not his meta. He really needs a buff or something. But I still use him for Earth Expedition, and occasionally for PvP, I will slap him on for some Guild Wars if I really feel like he could fit, which is why he's not on the best gear in the world, but it gets the job done. It has good substats, right? So the substats are actually pretty amazing. It just happens to be purple gear. So not bad substats, but could be better, and some low rolled pieces. For example, this one could have been super good, but it all low rolled. Then we have Melissa, who, oh, and as far as the artifact I use, since it's Dust Devil, I use this one for a chance to really cheese the opponent. Melissa, I used to use a lot. It's not that she's not a good unit. The thing is that she requires speed gear, and there's other units I prioritize the speed gear for. And as far as the Cleave build, which is the one I actually made the video originally for her, I hate Oxlots as a unit. I don't like the way he looks, so I don't want to use her with Oxlots. And because of that, she doesn't take priority as far as my DPS gear. And I just have other things I'm building, right? Like I want to build Kisei, for example. So Melissa kind of takes the back burner as far as the builds go. But I don't think she's a bad unit. I actually think she's really good for Guild Wars. And with Rylets popping up a little bit more, she's not terrible for Arena either. For RTA, it's a little bit harder to do because she has to be dummy fast for you to actually use her in RTA. So for the most part, I mean, I may build her again in the future if I ever have spare gear. But we all know how gearing in this game works. You're probably not going to get the gear for the unit that you want. So the next one is going to be Tamarine, who is the queen of just getting the right amount of stats. She barely does enough to do her job. That's why I didn't even max out the first one, because it doesn't make sense for me, since she doesn't really like need the attack, and one subset roll is not going to kill me. So I've used this Tamo all the way to Abyss 110, right? I use her in Earth Expedition. I use her pretty much everywhere, right? So I use her in a lot of situations, but she's only as good as she needs to be, so I haven't really changed out the build because she does her job perfectly. Luna, absolutely on spare gear. I don't think she's good for RTA right now, although it would be really cool to actually be able to use her as a big water DPS. But as of right now, she is not that big water DPS, but she's really good for PvE, right? I used to use her for Wyvern, but this is just for Expedition. Right, I only use this for Fire Expedition. That is the only reason I use her. So this build is very unoptimized. It's just pieces that I didn't fit onto any other unit, just because I didn't feel like it needed it. Right, like this piece might come off her, and I may give her something different whenever I decide I want to put this on a unit. Right, So for now, she's kind of a placeholder, and she does some job for Fire Expedition. Sigurd currently does not have her build on because I only have enough gear sets for running Banshee or for running Wyvern, and I switch it between my Biken. So she would have my Biken set that I'll show you guys the stats for it, but it's pretty standard. It's a crit damage set, although of course farming her own rage set would be ideal, and that would be great, but only for Wyvern, right? She's a Wyvern queen. For early game players, Sigrid is a G for Wyvern. She's probably the best Wyvern unit, right? And because Wyvern's so critical in this game, she is a good unit just because she's good at Wyvern. That is all she needs to do, and that's all that makes her really good. Just that alone is enough to build her. So that's why she's actually built and has some Molagoras in her to try to make the job easier. Crawl, I'm actually kind of happy with my Crawl build, except for one thing, is the FRS. But Crawl, tanky, and some decent speed and decently high FRS. But again, it's the FRS that's actually making me sad. I wish this was 30% more FRS. If this had 30% more FRS or even 40, I would be happy with the build. There are a couple pieces I could change. For example, this one I could change, drop the defense a little bit. But that extra FRS really kills me in RTA when I'm not able to resist a Fallen Cecilia. For Fire Expedition, he's my frontliner. I mean, I don't really change his build. He just uses the PvP overall. So for that, it is going to be quite easy. As far as the Karen, this is going to be my Karen. She's on a critical hit damage build. She's there for Wyvern and for Banshee one-shot. She's perfectly speed-tuned to go right after my Vivian and set up for everything. So for the most part, just a Banshee and Wyvern unit. Nothing crazy there. Cerise, on the other hand, I love the Cerise. The only thing I don't like is the speed is the HP is a little low. I'm actually fine with the speed. She doesn't need to be zooming. I'm not using her to speed contests, and cleavers usually grab her first anyway. So for the most part, she doesn't really need that much speed. I'd rather just be her tankier, right? And to be tankier, I would like to get 2k more HP. If I could get 2k more HP, I would be super ecstatic. But because we don't have that, and we need to get better pieces, mainly probably just switching out some of the other stuff. Right, so overall, really happy with her. Miss Confile to kind of cheese the opponent. I also do use her a lot for PvE, for Hall of Trials. I use her for Dark Expo. I use her for Dark Expo. Yeah, that's the other one. I almost said something else, but yeah, those, and it's enough, right? It's good for PvE and for PvP. For PvP, I would love if she had more health, right? I would use her a lot more. I also use her for Guild Wars defense. I just really like Cerise. I need to finish giving her more HP from some subs, and I think I'd be happy with how she is. Seaside Bellona, big thing with this one. She's a PvP Seaside. I will say right now, it's on an inferior build. Lifesteal Seaside is just strictly better. The other thing is the crit rate is low. Right, aside from those two things, the crit rate being low and her not being on lifesteal, I'm actually really happy with her. She performs well. Every time I get her in RTA, I win the fight, right? Because if they don't have a way to deal with Seaside, you automatically win. And for the most part, people don't have a way to deal with Seaside, so you automatically win, right? And it's hard to kind of switch out some of the pieces that I have on her. So that's why, for the most part, it's a little rough, but I am trying to farm some more Banshee. That's why I'm on Banshee mode right now, to kind of get a lifesteal set for my Seaside, so I'm able to use her. Dizzy used to be a monster, still amazing for PvE. I have her as a pocket pick for occasional scenarios in RTA, although she's not even in Level Violin right now because I never use her, right? Which is really sad. I only really use her for Abyss now. I will switch the build for Abyss, and that's about it. So for the most part, kind of a placeholder. This was the gear she used to use. It was specialized for her. And I just never get to use her anymore because she's not that great right now since F10A exists. And it's almost like, why pick F Dizzy when F10A just does a lot more, right? So it's tough justifying picking a Dizzy in certain situations. But there are times that you're like, man, Dizzy fits really well here as a counter pick. And those are the times that I will pick her. But that means it has to be no cleansing, no immunity, no last fighter crawl, which almost never happens. So for the most part, that's my Dizzy. She's on an okay build, nothing crazy. As far as Fairy Tail Tenebria, she is super scuffed, but I still use her. She's a unit that all she needs to do is do her S3. People think that you need a super fast one to do the job. You really don't. She's just such a strong unit. If you get the S3 off, you pretty much win, right? Or just her being in the draft already applies the pressure. Do I want to invest more in her? Yes, I want her to be at least 240 speed and at least 200 effectiveness. I know that means I will have to switch out the helmet, but I'm still trying to farm better helmets because I have terrible luck with speed helmets, and I also still have to like reforge some stuff. and sub out certain things that I don't need. For example, this attack is really useless on her. Honestly, just a different boots at this point because it has two really bad stats for her, the FRS and the attack. There's no reason she should have those two. So really need to switch out those boots. I mean, there's a lot of places I could change. She's kind of on spare gear, but she still does her job, right? Again, getting her to 200 effectiveness and 240 speed would be ideal. If I could get her even faster, like 250, that would be beautiful, right? That would be a dream come true. But until that happens, I'm okay with this build. I don't use her enough, but she does her job with this scuff build. So Luluka, on the other hand, I really like Luluka. I recently built her for PvE. She's not optimized. I do want to finish off maxing out some of this gear because I did start using her for Wyvern over Karen, just because it's faster, right? Her over Karen, she's a bit faster, and since I already use her for Fire Expedition, this makes it so it's really solid. I do want to get more crit rate, which she can get when I reforge a lot of these pieces. She will get a lot of critical hit rate if I actually do reforge this out. And so, since I only use her in fire content, she essentially has a pseudo 100% crit rate. The Unity set, again, being really nice to be able to dual attack and cheese some bosses. So pretty happy with it. Cauldra, of course, to be able to do extra damage and get to the bosses faster. Really, really happy with Luluka. I honestly think she's amazing, and I do want to Mulagora her S1 as well for the extra damage. She is really an amazing PvE unit. If you have our Luluka, I highly suggest you build her. I regret not building her sooner. Aether used to be a meme unit. I used to be able to use them a lot, but with the RTA meta being so hard right now and like things being super meta, it's really hard to get Aether to work. Just it's not easy to play fun units now, especially at high level, because things have just gotten so optimized recently in Epic 7. Montmorency fell off really hard for me. I still use her for Abyss, but for the most part, for all other content, I have my teams made. There's 0 point for me to have Montmorency. For RTA and for Guild Wars, I don't use her either. I have other options. I'd rather use Doris for Guild Wars if that happens, even though I don't have it build. So for the most part, she kind of fell off. She can do really good for Guild Wars, especially with something like a Dark Corvus. And she's amazing for early game. Don't get me wrong. She carried me in the early game. But now in the late game that I use other teams, that I don't need her as much, she kind of was taking a back burner and kind of just sits there in my box. Same thing with Angelica. Hard fell off after Wyvern. I don't use her anymore after Wyvern 13, after I got my General Purgus. I don't think it's worth investing in her, even with the EE. Diane, I consider making better, but since I know the coin shop is going to have Maid Chloe next month, and I have the coins to actually pull for Maid Chloe, I don't want to invest too much in my Diane. I still use her for Fire Expedition, and for Dark Expedition, and for Abyss, and that's all I need her to do. I don't really need her for PvP. I know she's really cool. I don't particularly like the playstyle. That's like the Diane playstyle, like the sustain, buff, damage playstyle. It's just never something I got into, even though I am going to get into it with Maid. So it's something that I don't want to make her better, but she kind of gets the job done. Of course, if she was better, if I want her to be better, I would give her like 40 more speed and 300 more defense, and then I'd be happy, right? And she has Rodham release, of course, for the healing. Elena, I used to use a lot for anti-cleaving. I don't use her as much right now. I am thinking of switching her to a counter build to counter carrots, right? So carrot is the big threat. I am forced right now to ban carrot, which sucks because I have to prevent carrot every game. So maybe we'll figure something out with Elena with a counter build to try to counter carrot better, since carrot does rely a lot on landing her burns, and Elena has ways to not only cleanse but also heal off of the carrot's S3, cut the opponent, and set up that S3, right? So she has a lot of tools in her kit to counter carrot, right? And it's one of the techs that people have been playing around with. So maybe I will make her a counter build, and I think she'll be really good. But this used to be for the F10A Cerise meta. She was high enough FRES to resist the Cerise. I don't think this is necessary anymore. So I might drop the FRES a little bit just so she can just barely resist the carrot burn, and give her more bulk to make her more annoying, and maybe more speed on a counter build to make her more threatening, right? So it has potential as a unit though. And I did use her for a couple of mid stages. As far as Alencia, I used to use a lot. I really invested in Alencia. I still think she's a good unit. It's just really hard to justify using her with carrot. Again, Carrot just shutting a lot of stuff out. But at the same time, I think with Mage, she can be a really good tech option. So I am really planning to build her with a little bit more effectiveness this time, since I have some leftover Bruiser here. And running, again, the old team I used to run with effectiveness 8 Tywin and Specimen Sus. Kind of like as a counter for those pesky Mei Chloe teams. Right, so something that I'm considering, right? I'm thinking about ways to counter those Mei Chloe teams and still have fun with the game. And Alencius might be my ticket into it. For Yuffie and Charles, I've never really used that often. Even when Charles was at his peak, I rarely used him. I only really used him for raid, for hard raid, for the queen. But since I use Robbie now, there's no need for me to use Charles. He's really fallen off. And he can still function for Guild Wars defense. He's still a decent Guild Wars defense unit, but it's almost not worth investing him just for that. So I don't want to give him that much of good gear when he's only going to sit on my defense and I'll never get to see play from him. As far as Falconeer Clary, this one's actually one of my pride and joy units. I have a love-hate relationship with her because 15% sometimes makes me want to pull my hairs out. But when she works, she works. And I have invested very heavily in her. She has some of my best speed pieces. And if Smilegate ever gives me a good sword and a good neck for speed, I will have one of the most ridiculous Falconeer Clarys in the game. And I'll update you guys when that does happen. But she arguably is probably my best build unit with some of the best speed gear that I have on this account, with something like this 27 speed, just ridiculous, right? Just incredibly good substats for her for a lot of these things. Really good effectiveness, really good everything, right? I am very happy with my Falconeer Clary. I love how she plays, but the day that Smilegate gives me a necklace or a sword that is speed, I will have a 290 speed Falconeer Clary with dummy tanky stats, and one day I will also max out this Justice for All and have a dummy fast annoying Falconeer Clary. Oh man, I can't wait for that day to happen. But until then, she's gonna be on this build, and she's still super annoying. I use her everywhere. I use her for Dark Expedition, I use her for Blue Expedition, I use her for the Asimec Hunt, I use her for Hall of Trials, I use her for RTA, I use her for Guild Wars. She is a unit that I use everywhere. I just suggest Falconeer Clary is just everything to me, right? I love this unit. More, who I'm still working on right now. I'm still trying to replace some of these pieces, but a video on him will be coming out very soon. He was a 4K sub reward. I just haven't gotten around to actually showcasing him because he's just kind of hard, right? But he did get his EE recently, so I do want to see how he performs. Senya, I don't know why I like Senya so much. I think it's just a design. I love Senya, and I invested a lot in her. I still want to finish Molagoring her and getting her like a slightly better gear pieces, like for example a better helmet that doesn't have effectiveness would be awesome, and giving her more attack. I think that would be great, right? If I could replace those pieces, replace this chest that is honestly not that great, and replace the boosts that are honestly just kind of okay, right? So again, replacing these pieces would be awesome. I just really like how Senya plays. Do I use her often? No, again, because Carrot exists and Carrot destroys everything. So does Landy, so does Tene, so does all the meta, but I still love using Senya for Guild Wars and Arena. And since I love her so much and I have so much fun with her, that justifies me keeping her built. Violet, I'm actually really happy with my Violet build. Aside from the fact that he's not an immunity, I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, he's pretty bulky. I would love more HP, right? Like, if we could ever replace this helmet for something that can actually be reforged and get him more HP, that's all he needs, right? And switching out this purple piece for a red piece would be awesome as well. But I'm not complaining, right? It's not bad substats. I rarely never use him. I used to use him. I use him for normal raid, and I've tried to play a little bit with him RTA, and it's really hard. But there are some situations where he can really pop off, and in those situations, oh man, he feels awesome. Bellona used to be an Abyss queen, and that's why I have her built, is because of Abyss. I don't use her anymore unless for the occasional Abyss run. I know you can use her for Asimec Hunt. I just didn't want to invest the gear in her and the Molagora. So for the most part, I only Molagora at the S1 because of Abyss, right? And she worked really well for Abyss, and that's all I needed her to do. So that's what Bellona was for. Landy, you all know Landy. I don't have the best build on her. I would love more attack and more critical hit damage. I don't mind that she's not super bulky because I'd rather her be a glass cannon that can do a ton of damage. But right now she's doing neither, right? So I might switch and commit to a full glass cannon Landy, or commit to a hybrid. But right now she's kind of like at an awkward spot where she doesn't do either job well. So I either have to give her more bulk or give her more something else. I do use it for PvE. For PvE, I will switch out this artifact for a Bloodstone, and she works amazing for Dark Expedition. She works amazing for Raid. She works amazing for Blue Expedition. She works amazing in a lot of PvE content. Landy, honestly, one of the best units out there. Pavel, I always liked the way Pavel looked, but I'm not a cleaver. And I don't have good speed gear. And this is one of the mistakes that I made back in the day. I'm not a cleaver, right? Is he a good unit? Yes. But I don't have the speed gear or the units to pair up with them properly. So right now he just sits in my box with wasted Molagora. And I Molagora at the S1. I don't know why, but I did. And I regret it every single day. I don't know why I did it. He's completely useless to me. Although he's a good unit, just never used him. Basar, who was going to make originally the video today, but I decided I would wait for longer. I should really Molagora this guy's skills because the damage comes in clutch a lot of the times. And the fact that I don't have that sometimes does lose me fights. So Molagoring Basar, I might actually consider Molagoring him. That damage goes a long way. Especially because Basar is usually on the field for quite a long time. Especially with the S2 also not having this extra chance to land the debuffs. There are times that there are fights that are super winnable, but because I don't have this Molagora, I end up losing. So Basar, I went for the tanky Basar. Still fast enough to contest most Bruiser teams, but slow and tanky enough to survive things like a Arbiter Vildred S3 or a potential Tomoka S3 or a potential Charon S3 that does come up more than it should in Arena and in Guild Wars. So for the most part, bulky. Would I love more speed? Absolutely. There are a couple pieces I can like fix. Like the neck is one of the big ones. That I can potentially get him more bulk, and getting red pieces would of course also make him better. But for the most part, he gets the job done, so there's no reason for him for me to try to make him even better, right? This is more than enough. 270 speed would be my ideal goal with the same, if not tankier stats. But as of right now, this is okay for me. Vivian, I use strictly just for Banshee one shot. So if you're expecting anything else, nope, it's just a Banshee Vivian. Very simple, very speed tune with the Karen and speed tune with the Viking. So that's why she has those very specific stats and has just enough damage to clear the first wave, but not enough to push the second wave forward too much. Rowana, I use for raid, and I use her to counter Seaside. Again, very basic. The Stella Harpa is there to stop some of the Seaside's more annoying stuff, as well as for auto raid. It is kind of pivotal. Not the best Rowana, but she gets her job done, and that's all I need her to do, is stop Seaside. General Purgus is a unit that I'm actually pretty happy with the build. I would love if he was faster, and I know there's some builds floating around where they have dropped this more Bruiser style of G-Per and have gone more for a speed. And I think it's really cool, but again, I am very short on speed gear, so he's going to stay on this Bruiser set for now. And the Bruiser set is perfectly fine because I do have some Bruiser cleaves with LQC. Again, the only thing I would change about him would be to give him more speed. That is pretty much all I want from him. So he can go before more of my DPSs, because a lot of my DPSs float around the 210 range. You guys saw the Landy. For him to give attack buff to Landy, he would need to be 220. So I will have to drop some stats somewhere. Probably the critical hit damage. I don't think he needs so much critical hit damage. I might drop that to 200, but change that extra stats to speed to get him to 220 so he can actually set up into my Landy. Right, so that's the goal with him. LQC, recent addition, fell in love with her, gave her a build, and use her all the time now. I am so happy I was able to get her off the Mystic Summons. She is ridiculously powerful. The dunk is so good. And she's just there to dunk, right? That's why she has such attack. She has the Hell Cutter build. No lifesteal build. Some speed so she can still cut in and doesn't get cut by other stuff. So the G-Perk LQC combo is tighter. So that's why she has a little bit of speed. So bad things don't happen to me in Arena. That's the big reason why I have the speed over going for the full attack splash dunk build. And the critical hit damage, of course, to actually kill the FCC. Because that's the big thing. You want to kill the FCC as well as do the splash damage in a lot of situations. A Tywin, who I used to use all the time. But to be quite frank, I rarely see myself drafting him in RTA anymore. He still is in my Guild Wars defense. And I still use him occasionally for Arena cleaving. But aside from that, I used to use him all the time in RTA. He's really fallen off. There's so much immunity. There's so much cleansing. There's so much stuff that just stops all of this, right? And because of all of that, I am not able to use him as well, right? So all of that stuff, not so great for my boy A Tywin. But again, I still use him, and I do have him on a damage build to be able to cleave with him. Arrowwell used to be a unit that I thought could work because I wanted to make a 3-star work, but her base stats are atrocious, and her barrier is ridiculously bad. Specimen says I'm actually decently proud of. I think I've made a really good spec build, and I don't use him. So I will ideally want to use him with something like A Tywin and Alencion when I do remake that combo, and he will be speed tuned to those units. But as of right now, he just kind of sits in my inventory, even though he has an amazing gear set, an amazing gear, and amazing everything, right? But again, no Aura, no Maid, no, it just doesn't have that much stuns for me to be able to set up my Specimen Says. Tempest Siren, I used to use a lot more, but right now it's a little scuffed. I would love to have a lot more damage and have her on basket, but I don't have multiple baskets. So right now she's just on this, and I occasionally use her for anti-cleaving or for cleaving myself. Watch a Shuri, back in the day when I tried cleaving, I used to use him. I don't use him anymore. Sage Ball, I have strictly just to counter cleave. I want to make a faster Sage Ball that is also bulkier, but it's been quite hard for me to get either of those things going, especially because there's so many wasted subsets in a lot of these pieces. Again, because I'm lacking a lot of good speed gear. So right now, he still does his job as being an annoying counter cleave, but I want him to be more than that. I want him to have significantly more effectiveness. I want him to be significantly faster so he can actually do his job properly. But for now, this is what I am stuck with. Alright, so moving on to my Rebel Light. Right now, she's kind of on a scuff build, which is one of the reasons why I've been farming Banshee so hard, is to get rid of these FRES pieces, and then I will go forward and go back to Wyvern to farm better pieces. This helmet makes 0 sense for Ruel. It has way too much attack, not enough FRES. Again, same thing in a lot of pieces. This didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. I am really severely lacking in heavy support pieces, and it really does show on units like my Ruel. So it's not one of my greatest units because I don't have the greatest supports on the planet. But again, it is what it is. She still works. I still use her for Guild Wars a lot. I still occasionally use her for Arena. And she's bulky, which is, I like it, right? And the attack, I mean, it doesn't really do anything. So kind of a lot of wasted stats. Ideally, what I would want is an extra 300 defense and an extra 80 FRES, which I know sounds like a lot, but that's what a really good Ruel would look like. So sadly, I cannot get those stats right now. And with the skin coming out, I really need to start farming some more Ruel stuff. Then now on to my Apocalypse Ravi. She's my best non-used unit. It's the same thing with Specimen Says. I love how they look. I occasionally will pull them out for RTA, but never really use, even though she has some amazing pieces on her. Why? It's just not her meta, and she's just really weak compared to a lot of Epic 7 heroes. I think she really needs a buff. For a Bruiser, she doesn't really have a clear identity, and it is very hard to do her job. Any Bruiser that requires you to kill to do their function is not something that is gonna be great, right? So with a Ravi, not the greatest thing in the world. Fallen Cecilia, really, really awesome looking unit. I really like Fallen Cecilia. I use her a lot. She's a little bit on the slow side. She has really high defense, but the HP is not as high as I would want it. And that reason is, again, I don't have the best support pieces, right? I wanted to make her more bulky. I can switch this for something else, but overall, I just need a better helmet, right? The helmet, like, I'm not using her for landing debuffs. I don't need the effectiveness. I don't need the attack, right? This could easily have been health percentage, and she would have a ton more health, right? And I can reforge it out, but I just haven't gotten around to it. The chest is actually one of the better pieces. The boots are actually not bad, although it did roll when I tried to reforge. It being so high on flat, I wish this was actually the percentage and this was the flat health. That would be much, much better for her. She would have way more health, but it's the best piece I had. This piece, not bad. It has a lot of defensive stats. I'm actually quite happy with it. And overall, I don't know. I like her. She's my Oreo soldier, and she's annoying. She's everywhere that you can possibly use Arena or RTA or PvP. Troublemaker Cosette is a unit that I built recently, and I still haven't really figured out how I want to use him. I mostly use him when FCC's banned and when Crawl is taken. When those two things happen, I will pull out my T Cosette. I want to use him more with things like Specimen Says to kind of do some more cool combos with him. But as of right now, I'm not able to do that. Arbiter Vildred, who I still haven't full Morgort out. Kind of a newer addition to my team. Of course, an Alexis Basket, but I use him a ton. So I really need to finish growing him because I do use him literally everywhere. He is one of the best units in this game. And I know there's a Degen build out there, but I just really like the speed build because it lets me do more damage and lets me do cooler cleaves, right? So because of that, I don't actually particularly am a big fan of the counter build. Although I know it'd be better for my account, I just really like the speed one, right? But I am farming some counter pieces in case I do want to go that route. But as of right now, Akali, another one of my pride and joy units. I have invested so much into this unit, and she's still not complete. Why do I say that? She's still missing 7% crit damage here, and she's still missing like 10 to 11% crit damage here, right? So she's missing like 20% crit damage. So I think if I can get that, I will be much happier with my Akali. She will be doing dummy damage. I also wish she was faster. If she was like 14 speed faster, I would say I would have the best Akali in the game. But because she's not 14 speed faster, she's a little bit on the slower side for Akalis, mainly because of this neck and mainly because of this ring low rolling instead of it was a quadra roll ring and it should have an extra 4 speed, but it low rolled, right? So it is what it is. Sucks when it happens, but it's still the best speed year I have to still keep offensive stats the way they are. Could also switch the helmet, but I would be losing a ton of attack, and I want her to be able to one-shot, which is what I primarily use her for, which is why I haven't switched her out of this build. Bloodbath Karen, I used to use her a lot back in the day. Right now, I really think she needs an EE, right? I just don't think she can do her job compared to other units. And although I know she has potential, but an EE would be the thing that pushes her over to actually be a viable unit. Rylot, again, a unit I'm actually really proud of. The only thing is I don't actually have a maxed out imprint. So I will have 100% crit if I ever pull more Violet and more Rylot dupes. I will be able to get that, and I will be super happy with the rest of the stat line. And of course, what would be really cool, I really like Violet Tasman because I pair him in tanky teams. And it is so nice watching him scale into the late game with the Violet Tasman. Although it sucks getting hit by Basars and Cerises. But again, RNG is RNG, and might as well just get hit by it. Operator Sigrid, another unit I want to invest more in. Right now, she's still in a blue ring. I want to make her way higher attack and way higher crit damage and way higher speed. I want her to be at least 260 speed with like 200 more attack and like 13 more critical hit damage. So she can actually do a really good opening start and allow me to do a little bit more fun cleaving that I don't currently do in this account, but I do want to be able to do in the future. But for the most part, she's a setup unit. I don't want to use her for the DPS only. And I know she's also pretty good into carrot if you have the setup with General Purgus. Champion Serato, again, only there primarily for counter and control. He has the level violin to strip the buffs. And he's on counter build because you don't always get debuffed. And sometimes they'll purposely try to play around the counter. Nah, let's not even give him the opportunity to do that, which is why I actually gave him the counter build. And it works really well. I am really happy with the Champ C build. It works perfectly fine for what I needed to do. Spectre Tenebria, not on lifesteal. Would it be awesome if she could be on lifesteal? Absolutely. Am I going to switch her anytime soon? Probably not. Getting the stat line is almost impossible. And I lose more games because then it didn't kill than I lose games because she didn't survive. So I'd rather her have more attack, more damage, and more speed than for her to have the lifesteal and have more survivability. That's just my 2 cents, and I just don't think I can ever replace some of these pieces. Like, some of these pieces are ridiculous, and there still probably are better Stennas out there than me. There's probably a Stenna that has the exact same stat line, but on lifesteal. And it's just, I just cannot believe people have gear like that. It just blows my mind that there's actually gear like that in this planet. But yeah, pretty happy with her. Tamara Luluka, a unit that recently I've been using a lot for RTA and for Guild Wars. I still need to reforge this helmet once I get a few more pieces. What sucks, she's not 100% crit. She will be very, very close once I do reforge her. I would love her to be 8 speed faster. I'm only going to be at 244, which is not that fast, to be completely honest with y'all. So I would be really happy if I could get that extra little bit of speed on her to let her be a really good speed contester. But I really like using Top Mono Luluka. She's so satisfying to play, does so much damage, and is very relevant in today's meta with Arbiter Builder and Maid being everywhere. Bloodborne Haste, only mainly there for Arbiter Builder, although I'm starting to re-gear him again, mainly because of Maid Chloe being so prevalent in today's meta. I really do think that ML Haste is significantly better now, because honestly, it's just like one of those things that's like, he just stops revives, and revives are super relevant, right? So with him being in the fray, I think it's really, really nice, and I need to use him more often, and I need to improve the build, so I actually use him more against Maid. Soul I've never used. CC, another unit that was kind of a mistake. I do want to play with her, and I do want to do a showcase of CC. I think it'd be really, really cool to actually use her, because she already has a lot of Mola in her, and I can just give her some Bruiser gear, and I think she can actually function really, really well, especially with the new EE that they've given her. It's actually really, really nice, right? A lot of really cool stuff on Cecilia that I think can be really, really fun. It's just there's other priority knights that perform the job better than her, and it's just hard to draft her in certain situations. Baiken is there for Banshee one-shots. This is the set that we talked about earlier that goes on my Sigrid. The only reason I don't enhance this is because if this goes into speed, it absolutely will destroy my team composition. I can reforge it out, so that's something I might consider doing now that subset change stones are a thing. I might finish this off to potentially get some critical hit damage for my Sigrid, but as of right now, I don't want to mess with the speed tuning because it's already so perfectly set up. I don't want to mess with it since it already works, so I'll keep it this way. And again, it's just there for the Banshee one-shot. Destina, mostly there to counter high damage teams that use control. I used to use her a lot more during the F10A Cerise era, which is why she's on Shimada staff. Would love for her to have a little bit more FRS along her kit, but she just needs so much stuff, particularly on this counter build that I have her on. So because she's on counter, and because I want her to have speed, and because I want her to have health, and because I want her to have FRS, she doesn't have the highest FRS on this planet, but her being Earth usually is enough to stop most F10s because it makes it a 50-50, right? Which is something that's pretty nice. Destitute Basal, I recently have gotten a lot more into using. I like Water's Origin because it makes it so they can't kill him. And he kind of self-heals and self-pushes up, giving him more turns to heal the team. Again, all I need is to finish reforging him, which only has one piece left. Would love for him to be a little bit faster. Would love for him to have a little bit more FRS, particularly because F10s nowadays are such high FRS. Honestly, he doesn't do a lot against F10, but he's really good into other situations, which is something that I really like, right? So I do like taking him when they don't take hard control. He's really good into like teams that don't use F10, which honestly most control teams use F10. So I don't find myself using him all the time, but against a Tywin and against certain situations where I want the CR push in arena against a Polides, not Polides in particular, but like T-Soren, he's really good into. So there's certain situations I still use him, and of course there's still the extra awakening I have not given him that will give him a little bit extra FRS and get him closer to 200 FRS. As Assassin Cartuja way back in the day, Shadow Rose from back in the day. Carrot, work in progress because this unit is busted and everyone should have a carrot. Of course, I might need more speed, more health, more bulk. Tenebria, I strictly only use for Earth Expedition, which is why she's on Radiant Forever and why she has these stats. And then everything from here, the Kise, another work in progress. I'm still trying to find the proper pieces for her and I really want to use her. I really do, but it's going to be really hard for me to find that speed gear to actually be able to use her. And then, of course, we have the Furious for Wyvern. Again, he just needs to be there to hit the defense, decrease defense. Although having some damage is nice to be able to do some stuff. But again, super scuffed just because he's just there for the Song of Stars. And the Kyries that I had to force build. And I just give her the gear when I need to use her. But she's strictly there for Abyss. And then everything else is projects that I never quite finished. And Kitty Cat was there just for an Abyss stage, which is why I actually used her at one point. So yeah, that's my account. Not bad. A lot of stuff. A lot of cool units that I have that I should bring back. One of them being the Kise that's going to be coming up. And the Cecilia and you want to bring back. I know that was a lot, but that is my account. And that's the gear I have on my units. Nothing really super crazy. Which is something that I think it's good to showcase that you can get pretty far in this game without having the godliest gear out there. I do have some particularly really good units, particularly in the fucking Eclairy side. But yeah, hopefully this video kind of gave you an idea on the gear for the units and the way to build them. And you can use this to your advantage. But that is all I got for you guys today. And I will see you next time. Peace.